sort of the move. These on? They seem to be on. It's the monkey spirit there.
Tereza, if yours doesn't work, can you use that one there?
Well, I think my one, maybe it's not on.
Checking.
No, we know there might be a problem with it. So do you want to use that one?
Right?
Yeah.
The power stick goes to you, Tereza.
So we're just going to have a appropriately wandering conversation, because that was very sort of languid, ambient sort of archaeology of the area that I felt in a very consciously speculative way seems to do very strange things with time and meanders. And so we're going to have a brief conversation and then open out to the audience for some possible questions. I guess taking apart any of the desire to try and find a way of encapsulating what it was, because I feel like it's a preemptive elegy that distracts itself and ends up in piracy. And then I think it's the grave scene I thought was particularly interesting, because you have this kind of strange flapping graveside balloon that seems to celebrate the possibility of mourning and says, "You will be missed, not you are missed." And I think that's something quite important to the film in a way, because it is this imagining of a development that is that will happen, and that does quite strange things to the movement of the film. So to begin quite broadly, I just want to ask you both about the way in which you both approached it, because I think collaboratively there are some quite different energies in the film, which I think felt beautifully summarised in the scene Giant Car, where you were sort of wandering in, and it is a kind of strange mixture of eerie and absurd, and you're like this sort of slightly anarchic child let loose in a toy shop after the adults have gone.
Yeah.
And the flow of your filming has something far more languid. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about personalities and artistic temperament and how that collaboration played out.
Tereza is very difficult to work with, as everyone who knows her. She's extremely aggressive. Obviously that came through in the film. She bullied me. Anything that I did was shouted.
We started with the red trousers and escalated.
Yeah. I don't want to jump in first. I know if you want to answer that, but I don't think that the experience of making the film reflects necessarily what the film is now, because I think really it's a project that has been generated by a very unique circumstance. Its methodology has created its content without design, which maybe is a metaphor for the way the area is. But yeah, there's no way that we sat down and thought, we're very different as people. How do we make a film that brings this to the fore? There's no design in the methodological approach to the film in that regard. I think by accident, the differences between us and our methods has created some interesting tension in the movie.
Yeah, and I think in some way it's kind of unlikely collaboration that has gone on actually for already 5 years, and begun in a kind of very organic way, and like Steve said, without any plan of where it's going. And actually there was something, that's what was very nice about it, is that sense of, actually it's kind of discovery. We let ourselves be open, and I think there was also a kind of attraction actually that we had to each other's energies, because they were the opposite almost. So that's something we talked about almost on the first walk we had, that there was something kind of missing, or like something that I needed, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I think that there's something that happens as someone who collaborates often, when you focus entirely upon a replacement of the power stick, and yeah, it was good.
As you were.
Thank you, sir. It's something that happens when you focus purely on the collaborative process as an act of friendship. That's actually my entire focus, and also because my side of the collaboration is not the film side nor the edit. I am kind of doing nothing, in a way, in this film. I'm very, very happy for that fact. The method of the film is the joy of going to meet up with Tereza once every couple of months, explore this area, and see this thing unfold. And so it's an even more extreme process than what one normally has in any creative act, where you generate a product that you then look at with other people and think, what is that? What have I done? For me, that's at 2 removes, because fundamentally, if the camera hadn't been working, I still would have made this film, because I was just going to hang out with Tereza and watch it kind of come together.
So it is very much like through interaction and through ambling, obliquely, the film incidentally arises in a way.
And it's so important the film captures that spirit even in its finished.
Well, because, yeah, I mean, it's kind of, and obviously I know there's some of you who know the area here well. It's a very strange liminal land that I find actually now when I walk in there, it's kind of quite hypnotic. Like it puts me in that state. So I almost had no, like, that was the only way I could film it, was that way. It's something quite, yeah, hypnotic.
That word is really useful, because I was sort of clutching at things to say, but with describing that sort of pace to it. And actually, just again, you talk about stillness and motion and stillness at a time, and this kind of movement between the inside and the outside that occurs. And it begins with you sort of saying that London is a place that refuses rest, that it's this kind of restless inability to have any sense of, I don't know, stasis of some sort. And that seems to chime with some of your methodologies, whereas I feel the film is quite restful at times. It has a meditative, strange quality to it that does have that hypnotic side to it. Did you feel often that you wanted to inject a different pace, or that you have a restless kind of engagement with the city?
I think that's Tereza's achievement with the technical elements of the film, the way cinematographically it's constructed in the edit, is that it refuses to speed itself up at certain times, and it would be so easy to do that, for us to force some sort of narrative or create some sort of engagement that was more than just trying to refocus a vision upon an area that no one looks at directly. I mean, everyone's experience of Wilson Junction is incidental. They're looking down or away or through. It's almost a perfect embodiment of that element of London that people are getting through to get to somewhere else where they're told to see. And so Tereza's camera is an intervention on that, one that forces everyone to see the canal at different times of the year, to see the railway lines and the way they intersect, with this gentle kind of gesture towards repetition. It's so far away from my personality or my ability to do that I think that's then what I've become in the film in a way, is this little monkey energy just on the edge of that kind of...
The non-existent cage, the railings?
The railings, yeah. So yeah, I think that's a great strength of the film.
No segue, but I wanted to bring up sound in the film as well, because that actually, the soundtrack itself has moments where, in diegetic ways, you are kind of playing with the railings and that kind of haptic, tactile sound, where it's very much about the kind of like a gentle, soft percussion that then becomes a fluttering, and that was with Yumi Mashiki.
Yeah, Yumi Mashiki, who is my wonderful collaborator, who is actually over there. So yeah, thank you so much, Yumi.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you about the sound of the film, because previously you've worked with Philip Jack and Scanners, or so that kind of textural quality to sound, which is certainly in the soundtrack, seems quite important to your filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm so, like I said, I'm so happy that Yumi just completely gets everything that I was trying to explain. So, for example, here is so much kind of metallic presence and the fences, and we were talking about the scene in Stalker when they go on the rail cart, and there's this sort of amazing soundtrack where the sound of the ambient sound of the space becomes the music, and I think I mean, Yumi sort of brought it to that.
And is that a collaboration that has been in other projects, you and Yumi working together, or is this?
Yeah, I mean, Yumi basically composes all the music for all my films for, I don't know, quite a few, about 6 years or 7 years. So yeah, I'm very lucky found here?
I guess one of the most obvious but things that you think of when you start watching the film, but I feel almost as a conversational direction it's possibly reductive of the kind of atmosphere in it, especially with some reductive connotations it now has. But how did you coordinate the kind of implications of psychogeography in the work, and that being something that in itself has become a territory that is haunted in its own palimpsest of writers writing back and forth and over? Was that something that played into it?
Well, for me, a lot of my work has kind of referenced some of the writers who have made psychogeography well known, I suppose. But I think my presence in the film has, if it resists something that people wouldn't notice, it's to be like the writer who writes things for the voiceover. That's why I like doing these conversational audio voiceovers and like to create something that I can't control. I just perform in the most naturalistic way through my friendship with Tereza when we're filming, and then record audio that Tereza then gets to choose from in the edit, really. Because I don't want to create these perfect poems or texts or pieces of prose that make it feel like it is some psychogeographical project where we started out with that kind of plan. Everything in the film has really been completely organic and naturalistic and born out of us just ambling and exploring and not making that kind of historical, hauntological, psychogeographical gesture. There is no real intellectualization of that, of the ideas of layers of history or ley lines, or I've done no historical research apart from what's incidental. I've not written anything about the project which is in some way a record of the place or the people. It is deliberately supposed to be what the area is experienced as for me, which is ambiguous, reflective, strange, changeable, liminal, oblique. And in that I need to resist some of those things that people talk about, you know, as a writer. Especially when really I feel most of the time, what do I do on this film? I don't do anything. Tereza is the filmmaker, it's Tereza's film. So in that, I want to stay that way. I want to know at the end, I was so happy to watch it and think, I didn't do nothing. It's a huge achievement. So I was built equally.
But I would never go to some of those places on my own, I think.
I'm your bodyguard. My role in making this film is I just watch around with my furry coat and be like, nobody touch Tereza. She's the talent. So for me, I have no engagement with psychogeography at all. Although I respect it, I'm no interest in it in regards to this film.
And I just want to say, for me, it's also about the kind of sensory engagement with the place. Obviously, because my work's a lot about the senses, so it's quite important for me to smell things and to touch them. And actually, that's something I need to remember. I brought a piece of Wisden Junction to anyone who wants to keep a little piece. So I'm going to pass a box soon around, and you can take it or you can leave it.
Eat it.
Yeah, whatever you want. But yeah, for me, psychogeography, I'm a little bit scared of that term. So I'm actually more interested in what Jean-Pierre talks about, which is mental morphology, which is sort of similar in some way. I'm not quite sure, but it's something to do with the intertwining of the sort of internal landscape and external landscape. So a kind of very deeply subjective point of view on things, which actually for me the Wisden Junction, because I used to live around there, and I'd walk through there, and first I found it incredibly ugly and kind of just depressing, but then the more I walked across it, the more I've actually grown to really like it and really appreciate the sense of freedom and space, this kind of great expanse of open space.
I love some of the parts where right at the beginning you're talking about those kind of overlooked micro kingdoms where you get the kind of poppy stalks, I think they were, and that kind of moss and algae that just growing out, and that kind of squelching, tactile, organic reality that's coming through definitely reminds me of some of the Svank Meyer stuff. Were there any other kind of like, do you draw from a lot of filmmakers while you make the film, or is it much more about the place and the process of it?
I mean, obviously, I'm sure I'm influenced by filmmakers, but I'm not consciously thinking now I'm going to research this or that. I think it's more just getting into a kind of frame of mind which is very meditative, and kind of once I've pick up the camera, I'm sort of in a different world. And I think, at that point it becomes about seeing the tiny things and actually, like the place just transforms into a different uniqueness.
And almost every time I've ever met Tereza has been when she's in this kind of meditative state. So it has been this amazing flowering of a collaboration to a friendship because of that. We meet, we have this beautiful rarefied like Sunday afternoon time where we talk, we waste loads of time, we never get around to the filming talk. Then when we enter into the space, I can see that's the way Tereza is making the film. So I write what I think might be useful, a contribution to the film while she's doing that. And in a way, because we have no end point, there's no design to make a film to come here tonight at this time until 3 or 4 months ago. The film has had an exhibition, publications, public events, public walks, short films in pieces, different screenings. It's process orientated. So watching Tereza do that is really distinct from the other films that I've worked on.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the process is very important because it's also about not being fixated on like final product, because actually you're more interested in the process of the transformation, and obviously want to keep going there and doing it for as long as we can.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to ask one more question, then see if there's anyone in the audience that wants to ask anything.
Cool.
The last question is more just a practical interest. Like, you talked about this almost like it was an instalment. Are you going to carry on with this project? And if so, will it be in the same approach? Is there anything else you want to bring to it? Or will you be responding to the place and the traversing of the place as that happens?
I think, who knows what will happen. I mean, at one point we had an idea about maybe including some sort of interviews with people, maybe staging some sort of performative things in the area, but who knows? Like, I think we've got no fixed plan.
I think we just plan to keep filming because it's a pleasure to do so, and also because the development is coming. So from when we started, when we met in 2015 and both realised we lived in the area and used that as an excuse to make a film, we were aware a few years later, not when we started, but we were aware a few years later in the midst of the film that 10 years after that point, there will be, I think it's 20,000 or 30,000 new homes. The whole of the canal will be just a water bay for giant new flats. That all of Wormwood Scrubs will be the garden of those flats. That the Kensal Green Cemetery has been written down actually as parkland for new residents. So the area will actually be completely disappeared, and Willesden Junction will be the intersection between HS2 and the other giant rail. So it will be, I think, the third busiest train station in London in 15 years. So I think we kind of said, if we're both still alive, that we'll film and watch that change happen, and then this film will have some real significance, because it'll be like Waterloo where we were filming there, and it really will if they ever finish HS2, etc.
Thank you. Thank you for such a beautiful film.
Thanks, Dave.
I'm just going to click on the box and pass it around.
Yeah.
I'll continue.
Okay, it's all good. Are there any questions? Has anyone got anything they'd like to ask either Steve or the roving Tereza?
As you gear your questions, I'd like to apologise, of course, like a Northern Rail platform announcer, for the failure of this service on the sonic front earlier on. We wanted to embody the failing infrastructure of the larger country in the room tonight. Panels are falling off over there. The whole place is basically made of cardboard. And we wanted to kind of give you a sense, in the spirit of Tereza's sensory encounter with the Willesden area. We wanted to bring that a little bit back home, I think, during the course of the screening, and we fulfilled our goal with the failure of all sound systems during the course of the conversation. Massive apologies. You were very good, Steve, of course, but there was a glitch in the system which we take full responsibility for. Nothing will change.
We forgive you and the Whitechapel.
That's basically how it was. I'm moving to the back. There's a question at the back.
Tereza has passed out the white box, which has pieces of actual Willesden Junction in it.
Yeah,
so take one and pass it
take
on.
one, yeah. It's from the wall on which Steve was painting. So it's like fake bits of silver, pink stones, green, but it's all fake.
Yeah,
Fake,
just like
like
this.
Sorry, thank you for the lovely film, by the way. It was brilliant and so thought-provoking and very lovely. I'm sorry, my question may seem a little accusational in its language, and I don't need it to be at all. Steve, you mentioned that these spaces that account for so much of the visuals or the content of the film are designed to be transitional and not to be rested in. They're not built for lingering or reflection. And by behaving in that way in those spaces, I wonder if you guys felt by that sort of otherness to that space, as if you were intrusive and you were intruders upon it, or rather having sort of archived it now, whether you guys feel a part of that place or your identities are mingled in some way.
It's a really nice question and not at all accusatory. You had me worried for a second. I was like, I think it's really shit. But then you were really sweet, so thank you. Tereza?
I think for me, I feel actually somehow I'm giving the place attention, and in that sense, I feel like I've made some sort of bond. It's probably like my own delusion, but I've actually somehow feel like I'm not threatened by it anymore. I feel more comfortable there. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but yeah.
I think every space in a film is really different, and I lived there for about 10 years down the road. So the canal, I used to run at night a lot, and so I'd run down the canal at like midnight and have this feeling like when I first encountered it, I was afraid of it, that there was a sense that I was completely outside of it, that it was someone else's. But over time, because of that, I actually felt the most safe I've ever felt in any place in London. And safe is not the terms of your question, but because we both lived there, and I spent over a decade there, and I used to spend lots of time in the cemetery jogging or writing even, it genuinely, I think, is the very genesis of the film, in that we felt we belonged there somehow. Because we don't, we weren't born there, we're not from there, is anyone. There's no residential bits quite there. Harlesden, Ladbroke Grove, White City, it's kind of this space. And Wormwood Scrubs, you can feel it. You could go there in the middle of a Saturday afternoon in a boiling hot summer day, and you'll see no more than 50 people in a massive green space, because people associate it with the prison and not the wildlife reserve that it is. So I think each space is different, and I certainly felt that it was actually my home, and I miss it. But I left, because I don't want to see the development happen there.
Thank you for your answers.
Thanks for your question. It's not such a nice question.
It's okay.
No, we need to record
Yeah.
it, so please do
Okay.
use it. Thank you.
Yeah, I was interested in when you were talking about it's your camera work looking at the landscape, but the other people are observers who see the same things, but actually there's no record of it. Like, for example, the train spotter. I wondered if you spoke to him, or asked to film him, or engaged him in some way.
I don't think I've engaged with him. Is that the one who was in the film? But yesterday I was talking to some of them.